everyone, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, hello, my name is Caroline and I make sewing tutorials and sewing patterns to help you along your sewing journey. And for today's video, I'll show you guys how to make a vest. The design I'll make today is longer and has a deep V neckline. It is more form-fitting and it will have princess seams on the front and on the back. But if you don't want to, you don't have to make yours as long as mine. It's totally up to you. I was actually between two different styles for this tutorial, a shorter one and this longer version. I wanted to make the shorter version with this blue linen here and use the leftovers from it to make a pleated pair of shorts to have kind of like a matching linen set. Maybe I'll still make this in the future if you guys would be interested in it, so let me know in the comments. But for today, I'll use the leftovers of fabric that I have from the old money dress with princess seams. On that video, I said the name of this fabric was cotton canvas, but I think the correct name of it in English is denim. In Portuguese, for the Brazilians out there, it's called sarja, and it's made out of 100% cotton. It's thicker and a little bit more structured, but I think this lighter weight linen would also work really well for it. It doesn't really need to be super structured or thick. And I line it with a lighter weight cotton poplin, which is also the same fabric that I used to line the old money dress. I have already made the pattern on my computer, and I have also tested it on an avatar with my own body measurements. I had to quickly make a little skirt for her because she was wearing panties and I was afraid YouTube would flag me for that. But the fit seems okay. The name of the program that I use to draft the patterns is Valentina, and the one that I use to test the pattern out on an avatar is called Clo 3D. I don't really know how to use Clo 3D in its entirety yet. I've only learned the basics through their YouTube channel. For the vest, I struggled quite a bit to fasten the buttons on the front. It just didn't work out and I have no idea what I was doing wrong. But with time, I'll get there. I have also printed the pattern pieces already. I just need to assemble them before starting to sew. But I'm going to repeat all the steps that I took on my computer, but on paper this time, because I think it's going to be easier for you guys to understand. I feel like just showing it on the computer might seem a little bit more complicated. I don't know. But before we go into pattern making, I'd like to take a moment to talk about today's sponsor, Skillshare. You've probably heard of them before. Skillshare is the largest online learning platform for creatives like us, with thousands of classes to choose from, all led by industry experts. And it's a great place for you to learn or get better at a certain skill that you're interested in. You can find so many classes about illustration, design, photography, productivity, and so much more. And Skillshare has also designed what they call learning paths, where they present to you handpicked classes about a certain topic that build on top of one another to take you from beginner all the way to a pro. I'm currently taking all of Ali Abdal's productivity classes, which are organized in order in a learning path. And if you'd like to join me and start learning or perfecting a new skill, the first 500 people to use my link in the description will get a 1-month free trial of Skillshare. I'll also leave a link to Ali's classes in the description if you guys will want to take them as well. But now let's go learn how to make the pattern for the vest. So I retraced the front of the basic bodice block to another piece of paper. And the vest is going to be longer, so I extended the front line around 22 centimeters, and this measurement will be different depending on your body, but 22 is my hip height, which is the vertical distance between the waist all the way to the widest part of your hips. You can measure it on yourself and see if it matches, but 22 is around how much it usually is. And from the hip height mark, I squared it to the side on a 90-degree angle. And I marked here my hips measurements, the widest part of my hips, divided by 4 plus 1 for a little bit of ease. In my case, that number is 25. And I also elongated the center front dart line all the way until we reach the hip line here. And I marked around 15 centimeters down so we can complete the rest of the dart. And now I'll also connect the waistline to the hip line with a little bit of a curve. And you can also smooth it out a little so it doesn't look pointy here. Now from the neckline down, I'm going to measure how low I want my neckline to hit, and in my case is 18 centimeters. It's going to be kind of a deep V neckline, but that's up to you. And I'll also mark around 2.5 centimeters, which is around 1 inch. to the side on the neckline, just so it doesn't stay too close to our neck. And here in the front, we're going to have a button closure, so we need to expand a little bit for the buttons. The width of this part will depend on the size of your button, but I'm going to make mine 4 centimeters in total, so I'll mark 2 centimeters to one side and 2 centimeters to the other side of the center. It's just a guideline now. And now we can connect this line to this line so we can draw the neckline. And I'm going to continue the line until it reaches the little dotted line that we marked as a guide for the placket. And here the side, you can make it as long as you want. It doesn't have to go all the way to the hip line. I'm going to mark around 20 centimeters, which is a little bit less than the hip line. But you can make it all the way down if you want. I'm just making it 20. And at the center, I want it to be a little bit of a V here at the front. So instead of going all the way down, I'm going to mark around 8 centimeters here. And 3.5 from here to here. But this is for me. If your size is bigger, then you might have to add a little bit more than just 3.5. And I'm going to connect this line to this line. Also extending it all the way to the center line. And this, so it doesn't end up being pointy, I'm going to go up 1 centimeter here, and I'll just connect it with a little bit of a curve. And I'm going to trim the paper a little. And to mark the placement of the buttons, I am marking from the little corner here 2 centimeters upwards, and from the little corner 2 centimeters downwards. Here. And then I'm getting the middle of both of those measurements. And in my case, I will add 3 buttons in total, but if you want, you can add more or less depending on your preference. Now for the princess cut, I'm going to mark around the middle of the armhole. And I'll connect it with a curve to the apex. And to transfer the shoulder darts to the princess cut, all we have to do is fold this line right here until it reaches the second one. Like this. And we have here the opening of our princess cut. And this neckline right here is really deep and it's a V cut. So if we don't take in a little bit on this part, there's a chance that it's going to be gaping later. So I'm going to measure around the middle of it. And I'll make a small dart of 1 centimeter to each side. Just connect it here, just so we can eliminate it. It doesn't have to be perfect. And to eliminate it, we just need to fold this one all the way here, just like we did with the shoulder. As you can see, the opening here became a little bit bigger, but that's okay. And now we retrace the neckline. And this is the center front and this is the side front. It's important for you to keep those things folded. And now we need to add seam allowance all around it, both pieces, all around. Now for the back, I also traced the back bodice block. And to make it easier, you can just place the side front, matching the waistline and the side, and just retrace the former curve of the waist that we made. The bottom here is the same. We just measure the hip height and our hip divided by 4 plus 1. We extend the center of waist dart all the way down and then mark 15 centimeters and connect it to the other 2. So the measurement that we put here, I'm also measuring down, but plus 1 centimeter. So this is, I think it's around 18, so I'm measuring 19 here. And I'll connect both with a little curve. I'll place the shoulder of the center front here just to make sure they have the exact same measurement. And I'll also lower a little bit downwards, just like 2 centimeters, and connect it with a curve. And here the shoulder, I'll measure the middle of the shoulder, and I'll connect it to this point. And now I can just cut it. And this is the center back and this is the side back. The center back we're going to place on top of the fold of the fabric, this part right here. So we don't need to add seam allowance to this side, but everywhere else, all of the other corners, you need to add seam allowance to it. And we have to cut all of those pieces, once in the lining and once in the fashion fabric. I have glued all of the sheets together now, and I'm going to cut them and then place them on top of the fabric. I placed the center back on the fold and I made sure that all of the grain lines were parallel, and in total it's going to use less than 1 meter, around 75-80 centimeters to cut on the fashion fabric, but you're also going to need the exact same amount to cut on the lining. I have finished cutting all of the pieces, both on the lining layer and on the fashion fabric. But before we sew them together, we have to do something called a stay stitch. This is the center front panel, and as you can see, it's cut on not exactly 45, but it's cut on an angle that is not parallel or perpendicular to the grain line. So if we don't do anything to prepare the neckline, there's a very high chance that it's going to stretch, especially depending on the fabric that you choose to make. And later there will be a higher chance that it's going to gape at the neckline. So a stay stitch is just a simple line of stitching that is done inside the seam allowance. It's not supposed to go further than here. It's supposed to stay like inside because it's not supposed to show up later, but once we stitch it here, it's going to keep the fabric from deforming. Ideally, you're not even supposed to be moving it around the way that I'm doing. Just cut it and leave it flat on the cutting table so it doesn't stretch and deform. But we're going to take the center front panel, and if you want, you can do the same thing to the armholes as well, so it doesn't deform because it's a curve. And we're going to run a stay stitch now, but remember, it has to be less than 1 centimeter away from the edge. So I stay stitched the neckline here and the armholes, and I've also cut all of the little notches here, so it's easier for me to place them right sides together on the front and on the back. This is the waistline and this is the bust line. And now I just need to place the center front and the side front right sides together, and the center back and the side backs right sides together as well. And I recommend you to start pinning from the little notch that we made, pin them together, and then you pin the opposite curves. And here at the curve, make sure to use a lot of pins because it's harder to sew. Now it's time to make small little cuts all around the curve of the front, because if we don't do that, it's not going to settle really well. It's going to look a little bit weird. So cut it close, but do not reach the stitch line because otherwise it's going to unravel the stitching. Now that I have ironed both of them, I'm going to place them right sides together like this. And sew them here at the shoulders. I have also ironed the seam of the shoulder open, and now I'm going to place them with the right sides facing up. And I'll also take the lining pieces that were also sewn the same way as the fashion layer, and I'll place it with the right sides facing down, so they'll have the right sides facing each other. And my lining is a little bit stained. I only noticed it after. I am matching the shoulder seam. And I'm going to sew with a straight stitch all around here. Now I'm going to make small cuts around the curve, especially at the back neckline. Now I'm going to sew the curve of both armholes together. Now I need to turn the right sides out, and I'm going to put my hand inside of it and pull it from the shoulders. Now the other side. But before we do anything else, I'm going to iron really well all of the seams that we just sewed, the entire neckline and the armholes. Ironing it makes a huge difference, as you can see here. So this is the front and this is the back. We're going to open up the sides like this of the front and of the back. We're going to place them right sides together, matching the lining to the lining and the fashion layer to the fashion layer. This part right here might be a little bit more complicated because it's already connected at the center front, but if you go slowly, you can still do it. So we're going to match the underarm seam, the waistline, the hem, and now we're going to do the same thing to the lining. We're going to match the waistline and the hemline as well. So the entire side is connected, and we're just going to sew it here 1 centimeter away from the edge. And I'll show you guys again how to do it on the other side, just in case it was a little bit confusing. This is the back, this is the front. We're going to separate the lining from the fashion layer like this and place them right sides together at the armhole. And match the lining with the lining all the way to the hem, which is the side of the front and the side of the back. And we'll do the same thing to the fashion layer. And we're going to sew from the hem of the lining all the way to the armhole seam that we sewed together, and then all the way to the hem of the fashion layer. And it's fully lined on the inside without any seam showing, and on the outside. And it's already starting to look really cute. The sun is almost setting now, and I wanted to talk to you guys in front of the camera before it sets because the light doesn't look really good when it's just coming from the ceiling. And I have kept my hair in front of it just so you guys don't see it and it doesn't ruin the surprise, but the fit is good. Basically, the only things that I have left to do now is to make the button cases, the buttonholes, and to sew the buttons on it. But I have 3 button options and I don't know which one to choose. I have this one that is white and pearly. I have this brown one that is basically the same one as the white. They're both bigger. And I have this smaller brown one right here. To be honest, I'm going more towards the smaller one because I feel like the bigger ones look a little bit too chunky. And the white one, the pearly white, was kind of disappearing, but I think the smaller one is going to look better, but I still haven't decided. So before I make them, I actually need to top stitch all around the neckline and the armholes so the lining stays in place. So I still have a little bit of time to decide. I'm going to see it in front of a mirror and see which one looks better. But I'm going to do that now. I'm going to top stitch it and then create the buttonhole cases. But before I top stitch it all around, I forgot to tell you guys something. I ironed and folded the hem 1 centimeter inside. So both the lining and the fashion layer, I ironed it inside. And I'm going to top stitch it also to keep everything without any finishes, like no need to use an overlocker or anything like that. So yeah. And to keep the lining inside, I'm going to top stitch all around the neckline, all the way down, and also the hem is going to be stitched as well, and the armholes all around the edge. I have transferred to the front bodice the marks for the buttons, and I'm going to create the buttonhole here and here and here, and then I'm going to sew the buttons to the other side after the buttonholes are done.
So casually